The words hung in the air between us like a secret we both knew, but had never dared to speak. Betty Williams stood at the bottom of the staircase, her fingers gripping the banister so tightly her knuckles had gone white. The afternoon light streaming through the window caught the tears she was trying so hard not to let fall. She looked up at me with those eyes that had haunted my dreams for months and whispered the words that would change everything. "If you turn around, I'll pretend I didn't see you." Hello, my name is Frank Alvarez. I'm 32 years old, and I run a small carpentry shop in a town where everyone knows everyone else's business. At least, they think they do. What they don't know is that for the past 6 months, I've been falling in love with a woman who wasn't supposed to matter to me at all. What they don't know is that I've been meeting her in secret, in stolen moments between her responsibilities and mine, learning the sound of her laugh and the way she takes her coffee and the dreams she's never told anyone else. What they don't know is that I was about to walk away from the best thing that had ever happened to me because I thought it was the right thing to do. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you how it really started, how a simple home repair job turned into something that would tear my carefully ordered world apart and put it back together in ways I never could have imagined. It was a Tuesday morning in March when Betty first called my shop. I remember because Tuesdays are usually slow, and I was working on a custom bookshelf for the library when the phone rang. Her voice was polite but strained, the kind of voice that comes from someone who's used to asking for help but hates having to do it. "Mr. Alvarez, I got your number from Julia Hernandez. She said you do good work." Julie runs the bakery downtown, and she sent me plenty of customers over the years. Good people mostly, people who pay their bills and don't try to negotiate my prices down to nothing. "What can I do for you, miss?" "It's Mrs. Williams, Betty Williams. I live on Maple Street, the blue house with the white shutters. My front steps are starting to say, and my husband says they're not safe anymore." I knew the house. I'd driven past it countless times on my way to jobs around town. It was one of those older homes that had good bones but needed constant attention. The kind of place that could be beautiful if someone cared enough to put in the work. "I can take a look this afternoon if you'd like. No charge for the estimate." "That would be wonderful. Would 2 o'clock work?" Before we see how this ends, tell us where you're watching from and hype this video in the comments. I'd love to know I'm not alone in thinking that sometimes the most important moments in our lives start with the simplest phone calls. I arrived at the Williams house at exactly 2 o'clock. My truck loaded with tools I probably wouldn't need for a simple estimate. But that's how I am. I like to be prepared for anything. The front steps were indeed sagging, probably had been for years. The support beams underneath were rotted through in places, and the whole structure had settled unevenly. It was the kind of job that looked simple from the outside, but would require tearing everything down and starting fresh. Betty answered the door before I could knock. She was smaller than I'd expected, maybe 5'4", with dark hair pulled back in a ponytail and wearing jeans that had seen better days. There was something about her that caught my attention immediately, not just her looks, but the way she carried herself. Like she was used to handling things on her own, but was tired of having to do it. "Mr. Alvarez, thank you so much for coming out." "Frank is fine. Let me take a look at what we're dealing with here." I spent 20 minutes examining the steps, taking measurements, checking the foundation. The whole time I was aware of her watching me from the doorway, occasionally asking questions about what I was finding. She was smart, asked the right questions, understood when I explained that the problem was bigger than it looked. "How long will it take?" she asked when I finished my inspection. 2 days, maybe 3. I'll need to tear out the old structure completely and pour a new foundation. It's not a patch job. She nodded, but I could see her doing calculations in her head. Money was tight. It always is for jobs like this. "What's your estimate?" I quoted her a fair price, probably less than I should have charged. She didn't flinch, but I saw the way her shoulders tensed slightly. "I'll need to talk to my husband about it. Can I call you tomorrow?" "Of course, take your time." I was loading my tools back into the truck when she came outside again. This time she looked different, more hesitant, like she wanted to say something but wasn't sure she should. "Frank, can I ask you something?" "Sure. Julie mentioned that you sometimes work out payment plans. Is that something you might consider?" There it was, the real reason she'd called me instead of one of the bigger contractors in town. She needed the work done, but she needed someone who would work with her on the money. We can figure something out. Don't worry about it. The relief on her face was immediate and genuine. Thank you. Really, I know it's not ideal for you. It's fine, I've been there. And I had been. Growing up, money was always tight in our house. My father worked construction when he could find it, and my mother cleaned houses to make ends meet. I knew what it was like to need something fixed, but not have the cash up front to pay for it. Betty called the next day and told me to go ahead with the work. We arranged for me to start the following Monday. And she said she could pay half up front and the rest in installments over the next 2 months. It was more generous than I usually offered, but something about her situation felt familiar. Maybe it was the way she'd thanked me, like she wasn't used to people being understanding about money. Maybe it was the fact that her husband hadn't been there during our conversation, and I got the sense that she was handling this on her own. Monday morning came, and I arrived at the William house at 7 sharp. Betty met me at the door with a cup of coffee and a smile that made me forget what I was supposed to be doing for a moment. I thought you might want some coffee before you start. It's going to be a long day. The coffee was perfect, strong but not bitter, with just enough cream to smooth out the edges. I complimented her on it, and she laughed. It's the only thing I'm actually good at making. Don't ask me to cook you dinner. I'll keep that in mind. I spent the morning tearing out the old steps, and Betty spent it watching me work from the kitchen window. Every time I looked up, she was there, and every time our eyes met, she'd quickly look away like she'd been caught doing something she shouldn't. It was endearing in a way that I tried not to think about too much. Around noon, she brought me a sandwich and another cup of coffee. You don't have to feed me, I told her. That wasn't part of our deal. I know. I wanted to. We sat on the front porch eating our sandwiches and talking about nothing important. She asked about my business, how long I'd been doing carpentry, whether I liked working for myself. I asked about the house, how long she'd lived there, what other projects she had planned, safe topics, polite conversation. But there was something underneath it, something neither of us was acknowledging. The way she looked at me when she thought I wasn't paying attention. The way I found myself taking longer breaks than I needed, just to have an excuse to talk to her. The way the air between us seemed charged with possibility. By the end of the first day, I had the old steps completely removed and the area prepped for the new foundation. Betty inspected my work with the seriousness of someone who actually understood what she was looking at. You're very thorough, she said. My father always told me that if you're going to do something, you might as well do it right the first time. Smart man. He was. He died when I was 25, but I still hear his voice every time I pick up a tool. I don't know why I told her that. I don't usually talk about my father with customers, but something about Betty made me want to share things I normally kept to myself. I'm sorry, she said, and the way she said it made me believe she really meant it. It was a long time ago. That doesn't make it easier. She was right, and the fact that she understood that without me having to explain it made something shift inside my chest. The second day, I poured the new foundation and started framing the new structure. Betty brought me coffee in the morning and lunch at noon, and we fell into an easy rhythm of conversation. She told me about her job at the elementary school, how she worked in the office and loved being around the kids, but sometimes felt like she was wasting her education. She'd been an English major in college, had wanted to teach, but life had gotten in the way. What stopped you? I asked. She was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the street like the answer might be written on the pavement. I got married young. James had big plans, and they didn't include me having a career that might take attention away from his. James, her husband, the man who wasn't there during any of our conversations, who hadn't been part of the decision to fix the steps, who apparently had opinions about what his wife should and shouldn't do with her life. Do you still want to teach? Sometimes I think about it, but it's been so long, and I'd have to go back to school to get my teaching certificate. James thinks it's a waste of money. There was something in her voice when she said his name. Not anger exactly, but resignation, like she'd had this conversation before and knew how it would end. It's never too late, I said. My cousin Laura went back to school when she was 40. She's a nurse now, loves it. Maybe, Betty said, but I could tell she didn't believe it. That afternoon, while I was working on the steps, I heard raised voices from inside the house, a man's voice, angry and demanding. Betty's voice, quieter but strained. I couldn't make out the words, but I didn't need to. I'd heard that tone before, in my own house growing up, before my father learned to control his temper. When Betty came outside 20 minutes later with my afternoon coffee, her eyes were red and she was trying too hard to smile. Everything okay? I asked. Fine. Just fine. But it wasn't fine, and we both knew it. The third day I finished the steps. They were solid, level, and would last for decades if properly maintained. Betty inspected my work with obvious pleasure, running her hand along the smooth railing, testing each step with her full weight. They're beautiful, she said. Really beautiful. They'll serve you well. I was packing up my tools when she handed me an envelope with my final payment. Inside was more than we'd agreed on. This is too much, I said. You did excellent work, and you were patient with me about the payment plan. We had a deal. Consider it a tip. I tried to give the extra money back, but she refused to take it. We stood there in her front yard arguing about money like an old married couple, until finally I gave up and put the envelope in my pocket. Thank you, I said, for the extra money and for the coffee and for feeding me. You didn't have to do any of that. I wanted to. There it was again, that phrase that seemed to carry more weight than it should. I wanted to, like she didn't get to do many things she wanted to do, so the small acts of kindness meant more to her than they should have. I should have left then, should have gotten in my truck and driven back to my shop and filed the Williams job away as another satisfied customer. Should have moved on to the next project, the next family, the next set of problems to solve. Instead, I found myself saying, if you ever need anything else fixed around here, give me a call. I will. But I didn't expect her to actually call. So when the phone rang 2 weeks later and I heard her voice on the other end, my heart did something complicated in my chest. Frank, it's Betty Williams. I hope I'm not bothering you. Not at all. What can I do for you? It's probably nothing, but there's a squeaky floorboard in my bedroom that's driving me crazy. James says I should just ignore it, but it's right next to my side of the bed, and every time I get up in the night, it sounds like a dying animal. I laughed, and she laughed too, and suddenly we were both laughing like it was the funniest thing either of us had heard in years. I can take a look at it, I said. It probably just needs a couple of screws tightened. Would this afternoon work? James is at work, and I know it's short notice, but I'll be there at 2. The squeaky floorboard was indeed a simple fix. 2 screws and 5 minutes of work. But Betty had made coffee, and she seemed genuinely interested in hearing about the other jobs I was working on. So I stayed for an hour, sitting at her kitchen table and talking about everything and nothing. She called again the next month about a loose cabinet door. The month after that, it was a wobbly table leg. Each job was small, barely worth the trip across town, but I went anyway, and each time we'd end up talking for longer than the repair took, sharing stories and opinions and pieces of ourselves that we probably shouldn't have been sharing. I learned that Betty read voraciously, mostly literary fiction and poetry. She'd lend me books sometimes, and I'd return them with notes in the margins, thoughts and questions that would spark our next conversation. I learned that she'd wanted to travel when she was younger, had dreamed of seeing Europe and Asia, and all the places she'd read about in books. I learned that she was funny and smart and kind, and that her marriage was slowly suffocating all the best parts of who she was. She learned that I'd never been married, that I'd come close once but it hadn't worked out. She learned that I read more than most people expected a carpenter to read, that I had opinions about books and movies and politics that sometimes surprised her. She learned that I was lonely in ways I'd never admitted to anyone, including myself. The jobs became more frequent: a sticky window, a loose handrail, a door that wouldn't close properly. Each one legitimate, but each one also an excuse for us to spend time together. We both knew what was happening, but neither of us acknowledged it directly, until the day she called about the bathroom faucet. It's dripping constantly, she said. James tried to fix it last weekend and made it worse. Now it sounds like a waterfall. I'll be right over. The faucet was indeed a disaster. James had apparently attacked it with the wrong tools and stripped several fittings. What should have been a simple washer replacement had turned into a complete rebuild. This is going to take a while, I told Betty. A couple of hours at least. That's fine, I'm not going anywhere. I worked steadily for 2 hours, replacing parts and rethreading connections. Betty brought me coffee and sat on the edge of the bathtub, watching me work and talking about a book she'd just finished. It was intimate in a way that made me acutely aware of where we were, in her bathroom, in her private space, while her husband was at work and the rest of the world went about its business. When I finished, I tested the faucet carefully. No drips, no leaks, perfect water pressure. "Try it," I said. Betty turned the handle and the clear water flowed smoothly from the spout. She smiled with genuine delight. "It's perfect. Thank you." We were standing close together in the small bathroom, and when she turned to thank me, her face was only inches from mine. I could smell her shampoo, could see the flecks of gold in her brown eyes, could feel the warmth of her breath on my cheek. For a moment, neither of us moved. The air between us was thick with possibility, with all the things we'd been not saying for months. I could have kissed her then. I wanted to kiss her, and from the way she was looking at me, I think she wanted me to. Instead, I stepped back. "I should go," I said. "Of course." But neither of us moved toward the door. "Betty," I said, and her name felt different in my mouth than it ever had before. Heavier, more important. "I know," she said quietly. "I know." We stood there in her bathroom, looking at each other and acknowledging without words what had been building between us for months. The attraction, yes, but more than that. The connection. The way we understood each other without having to explain ourselves. The way we'd both been looking forward to these small repairs more than we should have been. "This is complicated," I said. "I know." "You're married." "I know." "I should go." "You should." But I didn't go. Instead, I reached out and touched her face, just barely, just my fingertips against her cheek. She leaned into the touch like she'd been waiting for it her whole life. "Frank," she whispered. "I know." We didn't kiss that day. We didn't do anything that couldn't be explained away as friendship, as professional courtesy, as innocent human connection. But something had shifted between us, and we both knew there was no going back. I left her house that afternoon with my head spinning and my heart racing. I drove back to my shop and tried to focus on work, but all I could think about was the way she'd looked at me, the way she'd said my name, the way she'd leaned into my touch like she'd been starving for human contact. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling and trying to figure out what the hell I was doing. Betty Williams was married. She was a customer. She was off limits in every way that mattered. I should stop taking her calls, should refer her to another contractor, should put as much distance between us as possible. But when she called 2 days later, I answered on the first ring. "Frank, I'm sorry to bother you again." "You're not bothering me. There's a loose tile in the kitchen. It's probably nothing, but I'm worried someone might trip." "I'll be there this afternoon." The loose tile took 10 minutes to fix. We spent 3 hours talking afterward, sitting at her kitchen table with coffee and the comfortable silence that comes when two people understand each other completely. "Tell me about your marriage," I said finally, because I needed to understand what I was walking into. Betty was quiet for a long time, staring into her coffee cup like it might have answers. "We were young," she said finally. "I was 22, he was 24. He was confident and ambitious, and I thought that was what I wanted. Someone who knew what he wanted and went after it. And now? Now I realized that what he wanted was someone who would support his ambitions without having any of her own." She told me about the early years of their marriage, when James had been building his career in insurance, and she'd been expected to be the perfect supportive wife. How her dreams of teaching had been dismissed as impractical. How her love of books and learning had been tolerated but not encouraged. How she'd slowly become smaller and quieter, until she barely recognized herself. "Do you love him?" I asked, because I had to know. I did once, or I thought I did. Now I'm not sure I even know what love is supposed to feel like. What does it feel like with me? The question was out before I could stop myself. Betty looked up from her coffee cup and met my eyes, and I saw something there that made my chest tight. "Like I'm finally awake," she said. We started meeting more regularly after that. Not for repairs because we'd run out of plausible excuses, but for coffee at the diner on the edge of town where nobody we knew would see us. We told ourselves it was innocent, just friendship, just two people who enjoyed each other's company. But it wasn't innocent. and we both knew it. We talked about everything. Books and movies and music and politics and dreams and fears and all the small details of our daily lives. Betty was funny and smart and passionate about things I'd never thought much about. She made me want to read more, think more, be more than I'd ever imagined I could be. I told her about my childhood, about my father's temper and my mother's quiet strength, about the women I dated but never quite connected with, the relationships that had started with promise but faded into routine, about the loneliness that had become such a constant companion I'd stopped noticing it until she came along and showed me what it felt like to be truly seen by another person. She told me about her dreams of travel, of teaching, of writing, about the poems she wrote in secret and kept hidden in a box under her bed, about the way she felt trapped in a life that looked perfect from the outside but felt like a prison from the inside. "I keep thinking about that Robert Frost poem," she said one afternoon as we sat in my truck outside the diner. "The one about the road not taken." "You think you took the wrong road?" "I think I stopped walking altogether." The first time we kissed was on a Thursday afternoon in late September. We'd been meeting for coffee twice a week for 2 months, and the tension between us had become almost unbearable. We were sitting in my truck in the parking lot behind the library, talking about a book she'd lent me, when she suddenly stopped mid-sentence and looked at me with an expression I couldn't read. "What?" I asked. "I can't do this anymore," she said. My heart dropped. "Do what?" "Pretend that this is just friendship. Pretend that I don't think about you every day. Pretend that I don't wish things were different." "Betty, I know it's wrong. I know I'm married. I know this is complicated and messy and probably a mistake. But I can't pretend anymore that I don't have feelings for you." I reached for her hand, and she let me take it. Her fingers were cold, and she was trembling slightly. "I have feelings for you, too," I said. "I've been trying not to, but I do." "What do we do about it?" "I don't know." We sat there in the truck, holding hands and looking at each other, and I could see my own confusion and longing reflected in her eyes. Then, without planning it, without thinking about the consequences, I leaned over and kissed her. It was gentle at first, tentative, like we were both afraid the other might pull away. But when she kissed me back, when her hand came up to touch my face, when she made a small sound of longing deep in her throat, something broke open between us. When we finally pulled apart, we were both breathing hard. "Oh," she whispered. "Yeah, we can't do this. I know. I'm married. I know. But I don't want to stop. Neither do I. We didn't make love that day, or the next time we met, or the time after that. But we kissed and we held each other, and we talked about what it might be like if things were different. If she weren't married, if we'd met at a different time in our lives. If the world were a place where love was simple and straightforward instead of complicated and messy. I dream about you," she told me one afternoon as we sat by the lake on the edge of town. "I dream that we're somewhere else, somewhere we can just be together without all this complexity." "Where do we go in your dreams?" "Everywhere. Paris and Rome and little towns in Ireland where nobody knows us. We have a house by the ocean, and you build furniture, and I write, and we're just happy." "That sounds perfect." "It is, and then I wake up, and I'm in my bed next to James, and I remember that it's not real." The guilt was eating at both of us. Betty would go days without calling, trying to do the right thing, trying to be a good wife. But then she'd see something that reminded her of me, or read something she wanted to share with me, and she'd pick up the phone. I tried to stay away too, tried to focus on work, on other customers, on anything that didn't involve Betty Williams. But my heart wasn't in it. Everything felt gray and meaningless without her in it. "This is killing me," I told her one day in November. We were sitting in my truck outside the old movie theater, sharing coffee from a thermos and watching the first snow of the season fall on the windshield. "I know." "Me too. Maybe we should stop seeing each other. Maybe we should." But neither of us made any move to end it. Instead, we kept meeting, kept talking, kept falling deeper in love with each other and deeper into an impossible situation. James started getting suspicious around Christmas. Betty told me he'd been asking questions about where she went during the day, why she seemed distracted, why she was suddenly interested in books and ideas that had never mattered to her before. "He knows something's different," she said. "He doesn't know what, but he knows. What are you going to tell him? Nothing. What can I tell him? That I've fallen in love with another man? That I'm happier during 2 hours with you than I am during entire weeks at home? Betty, I know it's not fair to any of us, but I don't know how to stop. Neither do I. We tried to be more careful after that, met less frequently, chose more discreet locations, kept our conversations shorter. But it was like trying to hold back the ocean with our bare hands. The feelings between us had grown too strong to be contained by caution and good intentions. The breaking point came on a Tuesday afternoon in January. Betty called me at the shop, and I could tell immediately that something was wrong. Her voice was shaky, and she sounded like she'd been crying. "Frank, can you meet me? I need to see you." "What's wrong?" "I can't talk about it on the phone. Can you come to the library, the back parking lot?" I found her sitting in her car with the engine running, staring straight ahead with tears streaming down her face. I got in the passenger seat and immediately pulled her into my arms. "What happened?" "James knows," she said against my shoulder. "He knows about us." My blood went cold. "How?" "He saw us last week when we were at the diner. He was driving past and saw us sitting together. He's been watching me since then, following me, checking up on me." "What did he say?" "He wants me to stop seeing you. He says if I don't, he'll make sure everyone in town knows what kind of woman I am." I held her tighter, feeling helpless and angry and scared all at the same time. "What do you want to do?" "I don't know. I can't lose my job, Frank. I can't have my reputation destroyed. But I can't lose you either." "You won't lose me. How can you promise that?" "Because I love you," I said, and it was the first time either of us had said the words out loud. "I love you, and I'm not going anywhere." She pulled back to look at me, her eyes wide and searching. "You love me? I love you." "I love you too," she whispered. "God help me, I love you too." We held each other in her car in the library parking lot, and for a few minutes nothing else mattered. Not James, not the complications, not the impossible situation we'd created for ourselves. Just the two of us and the words we'd finally said out loud. But reality has a way of intruding on even the most perfect moments. "What are we going to do?" Betty asked. "I don't know, but we'll figure it out. He's my husband, Frank. He has legal rights. He could make this very ugly for both of us. Let him try." "You don't understand. James isn't just angry, he's vindictive. He'll destroy both of us if he can." I knew she was right. I'd seen men like James before, men who saw their wives as possessions rather than people, men who would burn everything down rather than admit they'd failed at something. "Maybe I should leave town," I said. "Go somewhere else. Start over." "No," the word came out fierce and immediate. "No, I won't let him drive you away." "Then what?" "I need time to think, to figure out what my options are." We agreed to stay away from each other for a while, to let James think he'd won, to buy ourselves time to figure out what to do next. It was the hardest thing I'd ever agreed to, but I could see the fear in Betty's eyes, and I knew she was right to be scared. 3 weeks passed without contact. 3 weeks of going through the motions of normal life while feeling like half of myself was missing. I threw myself into work, taking on more jobs than I could reasonably handle, staying busy from dawn until dark. But nothing helped. Everything reminded me of her. Every book I saw, every cup of coffee I drank, every song on the radio that we talked about. I was working late in my shop on a Friday night when someone knocked on the door. I looked up to see Betty standing outside, and my heart nearly stopped. She looked terrible, pale and thin, with dark circles under her eyes like she hadn't been sleeping. But she was there, and that was all that mattered. I let her in and locked the door behind her. "Are you okay?" I asked. "No," she said simply. "I'm not okay at all." She told me about the past 3 weeks, how James had been watching her constantly, checking her phone, questioning her about every minute she spent away from home. How he'd made it clear that he considered her betrayal a personal attack on his reputation and his manhood. How he'd threatened to tell her boss at the school about the affair, to make sure she lost her job and her standing in the community. But the worst part, she said, is that he's not wrong about some of it. I did betray him. I did have an affair. I did fall in love. with someone else while I was married to him. Betty. No, let me finish. He's not wrong about that. But he's wrong about why it happened. He thinks it's because I'm weak or selfish or immoral. He doesn't understand that I fell in love with you because you see me as a person, not as an extension of yourself. Because you listen to me and value my opinions and encourage my dreams instead of dismissing them. She was crying now, but she kept talking. I can't go back to the way things were, Frank. I can't pretend to be happy in a marriage that was killing me slowly. I can't pretend that these past months with you haven't been the happiest of my adult life. What are you saying? I'm saying I want to leave him. I'm saying I want to be with you, whatever that means, whatever it costs. The words hit me like a physical force. Everything I'd wanted to hear, everything I'd been afraid to hope for. Are you sure? I'm terrified, but yes, I'm sure. It won't be easy. James will make it as difficult as possible. I know. You might lose your job. People will talk. Some of them will never forgive you. I know. You'll have to start over completely. I know. She stepped closer to me, close enough that I could see the determination in her eyes along with the fear. But I'll be starting over as myself, not as someone else's idea of who I should be. I pulled her into my arms then, and we held each other like we were drowning, and each other was the only solid thing in the world. I love you, I said into her hair. I love you too. When? Soon. I need a few days to get my things together, to figure out where I'm going to stay. You can stay with me. Frank, that would just make things worse. If James finds out I moved straight from his house to yours, he'll use it against both of us. She was right, but I hated the idea of her being alone during what was going to be the most difficult time of her life. Julie Hernandez has a small apartment above the bakery, I said. She's been looking for someone to rent it. It's not much, but it's private. And Julie's discreet. That might work. We spent the next hour making plans. Betty would talk to Julie about the apartment. She'd start moving her things gradually, taking only what she absolutely needed. She'd wait until James was at work to have the conversation about leaving, to minimize the chance of things getting violent. What if he doesn't let you go quietly? I asked. Then we'll deal with it when it happens. Betty, I need you to promise me something. What? If he threatens you, if he gets violent, if you feel unsafe for even a second, you call me immediately. I don't care what time it is or where you are. You call me bowing. I will. Promise me. I promise. She left that night with a plan and a timeline. 1 week to get everything arranged. 1 week to find the courage to blow up her life for the chance at happiness. It was the longest week of my life. Betty moved into the apartment above Julie's bakery on a Thursday. She'd managed to get most of her things out while James was at work, leaving only a note explaining that she was leaving and would be in touch through a lawyer about the divorce proceedings. James didn't take it well. He showed up at my shop the next morning, and I knew the moment I saw his face that this wasn't going to be a civilized conversation. James Collins was a big man, soft around the middle, but still intimidating when he wanted to be. He had the kind of aggressive confidence that comes from never being told no about anything that really mattered to him. You son of a bitch, he said, not bothering with the pleasantries. James, and you destroyed my marriage. Your marriage was already broken. Bullshit. We were fine until you came along, filling her head with ideas about what she deserved. I set down the piece of wood I'd been sanding and faced him fully. I wasn't looking for a fight, but I wasn't going to back down either. Betty's a grown woman. She made her own choices. She made her choices because you seduced her. You took advantage of a vulnerable woman. That's not what happened. That's exactly what happened, and now you're going to pay for it. He stepped closer, and I could smell the alcohol on his breath. It was barely 10 in the morning, but he'd been drinking. I'm going to make sure everyone in this town knows what kind of man you are, he continued. I'm going to tell them how you went after a married woman, how you broke up the family for your own selfish reasons. Go ahead, I said. Tell them whatever you want. You think you're so smart, don't you? You think you won. But you have no idea what you've gotten yourself into. I got myself into a relationship with a woman I love, a woman who deserves better than what she had with you. That's when he swung at me. I saw it coming and managed to duck most of it, but his fist caught me on the side of the head hard enough to make my ears ring. I stumbled backward, more surprised than hurt. James, stop. But he was beyond reasoning. He came at me again, and this time I had to defend myself. I caught his wrist as he swung, twisted it behind his back, and pushed him face first against my workbench. That's enough, I said. He struggled against my grip for a few seconds, then went limp. Let me go. Are you done? Let me go. I released him and stepped back. He turned around, rubbing his wrist and glaring at me with pure hatred. This isn't over, he said. Yes, it is. Betty's made her choice. You need to respect that and move on. She's my wife. She's leaving you. The papers will be filed next week. We'll see about that. He left then, but not before making it clear that he considered this a war, not a breakup. I knew he'd be back, in one form or another. Men like James don't give up easily, especially when they feel like their pride has been damaged. I called Betty as soon as he was gone. Are you okay? She asked immediately. I'm fine. He came by the shop, made us some threats, threw a punch. Nothing I couldn't handle. Oh God, Frank, I'm so sorry. Don't apologize. This isn't your fault. It is, though. I brought this into your life. No, you brought love into my life. Everything else is just noise. She was quiet for a moment, and I could hear her crying softly. I'm scared, she said finally. I know, but we're going to get through this. What if he's right? What if I made a mistake? Do you think you made a mistake? Another long pause. No, she said finally. No, I don't. For the first time in years, I feel like I'm living my own life instead of someone else's version of what my life should be. Then that's all that matters. Over the next few weeks, James made good on his threats. He told anyone who would listen about Betty's affair, painting himself as the wronged husband and her as the unfaithful wife. Some people believed him. Some people chose sides. Some people who had been friendly to Betty for years suddenly found reasons to avoid her. But not everyone. Julie Hernandez stood by her, offering not just the apartment, but moral support and friendship during the hardest time of her life. Laura Mendoza, who taught at the elementary school, made it clear that Betty's personal life was none of anyone's business and that she was still a valued employee. Carolyn Cox, who ran the local book club that Betty had joined months earlier, organized a group of women to make sure Betty knew she wasn't alone. And I stood by her too, as publicly as I could without making things worse for her. When people asked me about the situation, I told them the truth, that Betty Williams was a good woman who deserved to be happy, and that I was proud to be part of her life. The divorce proceedings were ugly, as we'd expected. James fought everything, dragging out the process and running up legal bills that Betty could barely afford. He contested the division of assets, demanded alimony, and tried to paint Betty as an unfit person who didn't deserve anything from their marriage. But his lawyer was realistic about their chances, and eventually James was forced to accept a settlement that gave Betty half of their shared assets and allowed her to keep her maiden name. It wasn't generous, but it was enough for her to start over. The day the divorce was finalized, Betty came to my shop with tears in her eyes and a smile on her face. It's over, she said. How do you feel? Free, she said without hesitation. Scared and uncertain and worried about the future, but free. I kissed her then, right there in the middle of my shop with the door open and the whole world able to see. Because she was free, and I was in love with her, and nothing else mattered. What happens now, she asked. Now we figure out what we want our life to look like. Our life? If you want it to be our life. I want it to be our life. 6 months later, Betty moved in with me. Not because she had to, not because it was convenient or practical, but because we wanted to build a life together. She kept the apartment above the bakery as her office, a place where she could write and think and have space of her own. But home was my house, our house, the place where we drank coffee in the morning and talked about our days and planned our future. She started teaching that fall. The local community college needed someone to teach basic English composition, and they were willing to work with her on getting her certification updated. It wasn't the high school English position she dreamed of, but it was teaching, and she loved it. I expanded my business, hiring 2 part-time employees and taking on larger projects. Betty helped with the bookkeeping and the customer relations, and we discovered that we worked well together in business as well as in life. We traveled too, taking long weekends to visit the places Betty had dreamed about for so long. We couldn't afford Europe yet, but we went to New England in the fall to see the leaves change, and to the coast in the summer to watch the sunrise over the ocean. Each trip was a small adventure, a chance to see the world through each other's eyes. James moved away eventually, taking a job in another state where no one knew about the divorce or the circumstances that led to it. He sent Betty a letter before he left, not apologizing exactly, but acknowledging that their marriage had been broken long before I came along. It wasn't much, but it was something. "Do you ever regret it?" I asked Betty one evening as we sat on the porch swing I'd built for her birthday. "Leaving him, starting over, all of it?" She was quiet for a moment, looking out at the garden she'd planted in the spring. "I regret that it had to be so painful for everyone involved," she said finally. "I regret that some people got hurt. I regret that it took me so long to find the courage to leave a situation that wasn't working. But do you regret leaving?" "Never." She turned to look at me, and her eyes were clear and certain. "I regret staying as long as I did. I regret all the years I wasted being someone I wasn't. But I don't regret a single day since I chose to be with you. Even the hard days? Especially the hard days, because even the hard days with you are better than the easy days without you." That night, as we lay in bed listening to the rain on the roof, I thought about the journey that had brought us together. The phone call about the front steps that had started it all, the months of small repairs and growing attraction, the moment when we'd finally admitted our feelings, the difficult decision to leave her marriage, the ugly divorce and the gossip and the judgment from people who thought they knew our story. All of it had led to this moment, to this bed, to this woman sleeping beside me with her head on my shoulder and her hand over my heart. "Betty," I whispered. "I love you. I love you too." And that was enough. That was everything. The memory of that conversation came back to me now as I stood at the top of the stairs, looking down at Betty with tears in her eyes and her fingers gripping the banister. The afternoon light streaming through the window caught the tears she was trying so hard not to let fall. "If you turn around, I'll pretend I didn't see you," she whispered. But I didn't turn around. I couldn't turn around, because this woman, this brave, beautiful, complicated woman, had changed my life in ways I was still discovering. She'd shown me what it meant to be truly known by another person, what it felt like to love someone not despite their flaws, but because of their wholeness. Instead of turning around, I walked down the stairs toward her. "I don't want you to pretend," I said. "I want you to see me. I want you to see all of me. Frank, I want you to see that I'm scared too. Scared of how much I love you, scared of what that means, scared of all the ways this could go wrong." I reached the bottom of the stairs and stood in front of her, close enough to touch but not touching yet. But I'm more scared of walking away from the best thing that's ever happened to me because it's complicated or difficult, or because other people might not understand. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I love you, Betty Williams. I love your laugh and your intelligence and your courage and your dreams. I love the way you make coffee and the way you argue with me about books and the way you look at the world like it's full of possibilities." She was crying openly now, but she was smiling too. "I'm saying I want to build a life with you. Not a perfect life, not an easy life, but a real life. A life where we can be ourselves, where we can grow and change and support each other through whatever comes. Even if it's messy, especially if it's messy." I reached out and took her hands, and they were warm and steady in mine. "Marry me," I said. The words surprised me as much as they surprised her. I hadn't planned to propose today, hadn't planned to propose at all. But standing there in the afternoon light with this woman who had turned my world upside down and put it back together better than it had ever been, I couldn't imagine wanting anything else. "Frank, marry me, Betty, not because it's what people expect, not because it's the proper thing to do, but because I want to wake up next to you for the rest of my life. Because I want to grow old with you and see where this story goes." She looked at me for a long moment, and I could see her weighing the question, considering all the implications, all the ways our lives would change. "Yes," she said finally. "Yes, I'll marry you." I kissed her then, there at the bottom of the stairs where she'd been waiting, where she'd given me the choice to turn around and walk away from love or to walk toward it despite all the complications and uncertainties. I chose love. We both chose love. And that, I thought as I held her in my arms, was the only choice that mattered.